Glenn as an employee for quite a long time. And then there came a point where I went to him and I said, hey, I need to go back out and do my own thing, because I see all the money coming in and I'm getting my salary and I got benefits, but I need to get me paid for.
Yeah.
And he decided at that point, we negotiated some sweat equity deal to where I became a partner with an option to buy him out over time.
This is an electrifying episode of Bootstrapped Unicorns. And I say that not because this beard is showing how much white is here. It's not like I went and stuck my finger in a socket and that gray has just been hard earned. No, I actually have my friend here. His name's Doug Spence. Doug is the owner and founder. You started this business, yes?
No.
I got that right? You didn't?
I did not.
I see. I need that story. We're friends, but obviously not close enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Doug owns Central Florida Electrician.com. They're a family owned and operated, very well respected electricians firm here in Central Florida. And what you may or may not know about me, if you've been following the show at all, I have a hot button for the trades. Spent a long time storytelling in the industry of manufacturing and the trades, and I'm angry with our culture for how we have stepped on and maybe pissed on the trades. The work that is done in there is noble. It is needed, and it also is very fulfilling. It can build a great life for the workers and for the business owners as well. So today on Bootstrapped Unicorns, we're going to talk with Doug. I want to learn about your journey. I also want to learn about maybe some of the struggles when it comes to hiring in the industry. I bet that's a real thing. Mm-hmm. And then can we just meander and have some fun?
Sure.
All right, without further ado, everybody, it's Doug Spence. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so Doug, give me the ground level details so the audience has a sense of what you've got going on today. You've got how many employees, generally, like where's the office, your family's involved, what's that mean?
So we're located on Washington and Texas, which is basically John Young and Washington over near the Camping World Stadium.
So out of the area, people, that's downtown Orlando.
Yeah. We've got 14 employees this week, and I say this week because sometimes it goes up and down. 14 employees this week, including two of my sons, Doug Jr. and Ben. Ben works in the field as a foreman, and Doug Jr. works in the office as a director, and he's basically responsible for the day-to-day operations, purchasing materials, scheduling labor. And we have Kathy in the office, who is the service writer, his right hand, and making sure that guys are scheduled and dispatched properly, permitting, billing, things like that. And then my wife's in the office as the office manager and bookkeeper. Awesome.
So I've had family involved in my business on and off for years. Mm-hmm. There's good and bad to that.
Sure.
And I know you love them. I've seen you interact with all of them. So I was like, no, and in my family too, there's no pick on any of my family members. But for you, how was the whole family business experience? Is it fulfilling? Do you kind of wonder if maybe you should have just hired so you don't involve your family and you've got separation?
Well, I've got some... excuse me, I've got some difficulties with my wife wanting to work every day because she'd much rather be grandmother to our 7 grandkids. And that's okay. I can't really fault her for that. But she doesn't like to come in every day, so we work around that. Doug Jr., on the other hand, is involved every day, hands-on. He and I tackle all the big problems together. And I've afforded him the latitude to make decisions and just live with it. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't wait for me to approve it, just make the call and we'll live with it. And he does very good at it. Most of the decisions he makes, probably 99% of them, are exactly what I would do. Just had one this week that he did something for one person in particular and went to me and he's like, hey, I wasn't going to tell you about this. And I'm like, I actually called him and was going to do the same thing. So we're pretty much on the same page. And then Ben, on the other hand, he's not as involved with the office. He's not really interested in being involved with the workings inside the office and finds it boring. And I can relate to that because when I was a kid, I didn't want to be in the office. I enjoyed being in the field and turning screws. And that's where he finds his happy place, is just out there doing the work. But it's nice to be involved with my sons on a daily basis. I mean, from a standpoint that I divorced their mom and had to pay child support and fight to see them on Tuesdays and Thursdays and every other weekend. And there was a time when I moved out that I thought, man, I may not see these boys again because it was just that difficult.
Wow.
And now I get to see him every day, and we're close, and I couldn't ask for much more than that. So it's a good thing for me overall.
Sounds like a miracle.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. Yeah, so in a previous business that I owned, I had family involved, and one of our family members said, you don't hire and fire family. You vote them in or you vote them out.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I buy it, and in some ways, it was a very toxic belief system because some people aren't meant for certain businesses. Mm-hmm. Maybe there are players that are out of position. I like to believe that we're all made for something in this world. It doesn't have to be, we don't all get to be presidents, so we're not all made for the big thing necessarily, but we're all here for a reason. And sometimes that reason might not be the family business. I wonder how do you, I wasn't planning on going here yet. Actually, I really want to get to your personal story, how you got into the industry. But I think it's important for our audience to, put to thought what it means to have family members involved in their business. How do you have the hard conversations? There have to be some. How long has the business existed?
Since 96.
Right. So you've had enough time where maybe somebody made the wrong call and you had to, clean up the crap. Or maybe there's a disagreement. In those moments, and maybe they weren't big blow-ups or anything, but how does your family handle the reality that there is business and family happening concurrently?
I'm pretty blessed with my sons. That the biggest conflict we might have, I just discussed it with Ben yesterday. He'll come into the office and he'll say something like, well, whatever it is you do for work, because he has no idea what's going on in the office. He doesn't want to know. But they'll joke, him and his brother will both joke about, whatever Dad's doing in there, and it's like, without me, you wouldn't have it. But they don't understand it. So we kind of joke about it. That's really the worst of it. But there's never been any decision that was that big of a deal where we had to have the hard conversation. It's really not. But I think I'm probably a bit of a unicorn with that because my sons are very good at what they do. They're dedicated, and they have that give a shit factor that I constantly look for in guys. I've hired guys off the street that were not as qualified as someone else, but they had the give a shit. And I preach it all the time.
How do you identify that? How do you say that guy's got it?
Well, it's a matter of the type of individual that will stay late because I know that I'll get this done in the next 20 minutes, but if I pack up, I'm going to have to get set up again in the morning and cost him their 2-3 hours. But he'll stay those 20 minutes and get it done. I don't mind paying for the overtime. He knows I'll pay him for the overtime, but he's got to give a shit like, this is the best thing for the company to get it done right now. That type of thing. That's one example. Both of my sons are very highly motivated, and they're task-oriented. Like if this is the task of the day, we're going to get it completed. So I'm blessed with that.
Yeah, you really are. I think our society has struggled and limped around in lacking the give a shit. There's a self-motivated give a shit. They care a lot about what's happening with themselves. But I think there's enough people out there who are struggling to figure out how to get that to extend to other people, situations, businesses that, when you find them, man, you got to keep them.
Yep.
Yeah, you really do. So Doug, as a kid, wanted to be what? When you were growing up, what was the vision?
I didn't want to be anything.
Really?
Nothing. I had no motivations. I did good in school, in high school. I had good grades. My dad comes into my bedroom one day. It was probably, 6 weeks before I was going to graduate. And he says, Doug, your mom and I have talked. If you want to go to college, we're going to help you out any way we can. Go to college. And I had already taken the ASVAB and talked about joining the military, and they're telling me I could be a nuclear engineer or whatever, and they're going to put me on a submarine and all this cool stuff. And it's like, I'm smart, whatever. But all I really cared about was which girl I was going to take out on Friday and what type of wax am I going to put on my Camaro. And that was it. That was honestly all I cared about. So when Dad told me that, I'm like, Dad, I don't want to go to college. I don't care about none of that. I'm just hanging out with my bros and dating so-and-so on the weekends.
This sounds like a New Jersey story. Where'd you grow up?
Pompano Beach, Florida.
There's an element of New Jersey in Pompano Beach.
That's where everybody's grandmother moves to retire is South Florida. So probably. Maybe it was a learned attitude. But, It was definitely me. I didn't care. I didn't want to be anything. My dad was a union carpenter. When he finished being a union carpenter, he started his own closet shelving business. Today, he's a building official. He does plans examining and stuff like that. My brother went through the same apprenticeship as my dad. He's a carpenter, and now he owns a remodeling business over in Tampa. He's a general contractor over there. And when Dad came to me and said, "Do you want to go to college?" I'm like, "Nah, I'm just going to hang out." Well, a few weeks later, he comes back and he says, "All right, here's part 2. You got to get a job because you're not going to sit here and do nothing." And all I was doing was working for him part-time while I'm going to high school. And he's like, "We're going to set you up with the Carpenters Union apprenticeship." And I'm like, "Dad, you come home covered in sawdust and drywall dust every day." This is a true story. Like, I'm not embellishing this. This is how cocky and ignorant I was. I said, "Dad, you complain about not making enough money and you're covered in dirt and you're miserable. I don't want that. Who makes more money?" And he says, "Well, plumbers make the most." Immediately in my mind, I could picture toilets.
Yep.
And I'm like, "I ain't messing with doo-doo." That's exactly what I said. No doo-doo for me. And he goes, "Well, electricians make the most, but they're a bunch of prima donnas. That'll be me." And that is how my dad called over to a guy named Chick Perez at the local 728 Union Apprenticeship Hall. And he knew him because my dad was the recording secretary for his local. And he goes, "Hey, my son wants to be an electrician." No problem, send him over here. I did the placement exam. It's some simple algebra and problem solving, square peg, round hole type of stuff. And they're like, "Oh, he's a good fit." And I was in. So 1988, I graduated high school on a Saturday. And on Monday, I went to work on a shopping mall, 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, making $8.50 an hour, and getting overtime and had immediate benefits.
What was minimum wage in '88? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but it had to be less than the $8.50.
All right, we're going to ask Siri. Hold on. Hey, Siri, what was minimum wage in 1988? $3.35.
There you go.
Wow. You were crushing
it. Living at home with mom and dad, bankrolling all that overtime.
And you already had the Camaro.
Oh, yeah.
So what do you do with all that money?
You date girls.
Got it.
That's all I was doing. That's all I was worried about.
Wow.
So I went to trade school, and it was a 5-year program. So it was every Tuesday and Thursday night for about 3 hours, I'd go to school. And it was during the school year. So in Fort Lauderdale, when they were on summer break or winter break, we were off.
Okay.
But while high school was on, we would go in on Tuesdays and Thursday evenings to a trade school. And we learned National Electric Code. We learned motor control. We learned fire alarm. We learned PLCs. It was a lot of different stuff. And they prepared you for the journeyman's test. So there's 2 levels of licenses in the state of Florida. I'm sure it's similar in other states, but I've only ever lived here, and that's all I can speak of. But you get a journeyman's license to work for a company and a master's license to be the contractor. So in my 3rd year of apprenticeship, I already had my journeyman's license.
Wow. That seems fast.
It was. There were some people that didn't get it until their 5th year. But they encouraged us because as soon as you had 3 years of working hours, which, by the way, while you're going to school, they put you to work as an apprentice. And each year you get a raise. So every 12 months, you're bumped up to the next level.
Wow.
So in 3 years, I had the hours. I put in the request to take the test. I took the test, passed it the first time, and I was a journeyman. And that was just Broward County journeyman.
Okay.
So each county has their own journeyman's license.
You
can still get a master's license in each county, but those are considered an ER license, whereas my license today is an EC, which means I'm state licensed. Every county across the state.
That makes sense to me. I was going to ask you about that because I wouldn't want to be hemmed in to one county because I suppose if you cross a county border and you do work and maybe you're a little bit unaware that you just happen to step over the border, you might be out of compliance with your license.
Reciprocity from county to county you can navigate it pretty easy.
Oh, okay.
It's time, it's money, but it's doable. It's not difficult.
Okay. Well, that's helpful at least. I wouldn't want to be hampered, but the fact that you're statewide makes way more sense. So did you ever go master level then, or is that where?
Yeah, that's where I'm at now.
Awesome. All right, I'm sitting at the feet of a master.
Yeah.
So you had no plan to do it, but you did it.
Yeah.
And how long did you do it before you're like,
That's
I should
exactly
be the boss?
where I was going to go. So, in my third year, I was 20 years old. Maybe I was 21 because DJ had already been born. So I was 21 years old, and I'm on the job one day, and I'm reflecting back. Like the first day on the job, I remember getting in a truck with the foreman at this shopping mall. It was the Plantation Fashion Mall, which I'm old enough now that my first job has been bulldozed. That building's completely gone.
Wow.
But when I got on the job, I get in the truck with this guy, and he's driving me up the parking garage to drop me off on the third floor, and I'm going to work in the food court. And by food court, I mean that was just the area. There was no restaurants there. It was just raw block walls. We're running pipe, pulling wire. So I look in the back of the truck, and I see all this conduit in the back of the truck. Now, keep in mind, my dad was a carpenter. He taught me on how to fix my car and how to change my brakes and things like that. He was very mechanical, or is very mechanical, and taught me a lot of things about working with my hands, but he couldn't teach me much about electrical, and
Sure.
I didn't understand that pipe was for electricians. So I'm looking in the bed of the truck, and I'm thinking to myself, what is all this pipe for? Well, it was for electric work, but I was smart enough. I didn't ask because, boy, I would have been branded as a dummy from day one. But I'm looking back that one day, and I'm thinking, man, I didn't even know what conduit was for 3 years ago. And here I am doing electric work, and I'm pretty good at it, and I'm happy with it. I got all these really cool tools, and I get raises every year. I guess I'll stick with it. So it was my third year that I finally decided, yeah, I'm going to stick with it. And that's the same time I decided to get my journeyman's, because my father was always pushing me to, get a license. Okay. So I got the journeyman's license, and that was when I started pushing forward. So fast forward to my fifth year apprenticeship, where you're not supposed to be running work at that level, but some guys excel, or people excel, because there's female electricians as well. In my fifth year, I had excelled, and I was working with a foreman who was going through a crazy divorce and frequently not on the job. And he'd just tell me, look, this is what you're going to do tomorrow. And I'd read the blueprints, lay out the guys, tell them what to do. These were journeymen with 15, 20 years experience, and I'm telling them what to do as a fifth-year apprentice. But I was assertive, and I had to give a shit, so it got done. And I was pretty proud of that, So fifth-year apprentice and running work, and that was the catapult to the next level.
And so the catapult to the next level is, and that I guess defining that next level is journeyman licensure was already under your belt.
Yeah.
So what is the next level after that?
So you've got to have, back then you had to have the journeyman's license for so long before you could take the master's test. I believe today you only need 4 or 5 years experience, and by experience, W-2s or a letter from a company that you've worked for verifying those hours of experience so that you can sit for the master's exam.
Got it. And then did you work for others as a master's for a while?
No. In fact, I took my master's exam right after trade school and failed. And I failed it by like 3 points.
That's frustrating.
And I was just so pissed off, and I'm like, well, I don't really need it. And you know what, looking back, that I really let my dad down, because my dad was always, you gotta get your master's, He stayed at me on it for years. Well, when I left, I was working for the labor union, and they told me, they're like, look, there's no work in Fort Lauderdale. This was 1993. And they're like, we don't have anything here. Nobody's hiring, but you can go to wherever it was, Utah or someplace. It was someplace in the country, because as a union electrician, you can travel from local to local and take jobs. And they're like, they're working 5 days a week, 12 hours a day. This one's working 7 days a week, 10 hours a day.
Wow.
And I'm like, guys, I got kids. I'm not leaving and traveling the country. So I took a job with a municipality.
Oh.
And I worked for a water and wastewater plant down in Margate, Florida for almost 4 years.
Should I be finding it ironic that you ended up in a
Toilet.
plumbing
Yeah.
toilet? Yeah.
It was the craziest thing, yeah. Like, I wasn't real happy being in the sewer plant, but
It's a giant electric toilet.
oh man, it was disgusting. Yeah, but it was a unique experience.
Yeah.
Like something that I wish I could have developed in my business now, because that type of industry, the industrial electric, is a lot of money. There's a lot of revenue in that, but the competition in Florida is big for that, and they're very well established. So a small company like mine that does restaurant retail would have a very difficult time breaching that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I can't imagine walking into a Lockheed Mart and saying, I'm going to wire your new manufacturing floor is an easy sell.
Yep.
Yeah. So now you're working municipal.
Yep.
At what point? And here's I guess where I keep tripping. There is a very nasty reality for would-be entrepreneurs, mm-hmm. which is, I've got a bird in the hand, I've got a paycheck, I've got a thing. And so many of them find themselves unfulfilled or wanting a change for some reason. But many would-be entrepreneurs who never become entrepreneurs don't leap because they either feel they have to keep the thing mm-hmm. in order to keep their family eating, or they're just too scared to make the leap for maybe a variety of other reasons. And then there's some people who do. They go, okay, I'm no longer the guy with this great paycheck and security and health insurance. I'm the idiot who's going to put my fate in my own hands, and I have to learn all these other business skills. But I've done it. You've mm-hmm. clearly done it. When did you do it, and do you have a reason why it happened?
Dumb luck.
I love dumb luck.
Believe it or not,
tell me about it.
Like, I've told my sons this story 100 times. Like, if they watch this, they'll be like, oh, here comes the dumb luck story. Because it's dumb luck. Like, I didn't want to be an electrician. I didn't mean to be an electrician. I just fell into it. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, I like it, and it makes money, and I stayed with it. Mm-hmm. And when I went to the city, I had to leave there because my give a shit was eating at me like anxiety. When I looked around and there was another electrician in the facility that was just a lazy turd. And
he fit in the environment.
Yeah, he didn't care. And nobody cared. So I found myself filling all the work orders for the water plant one month and then going to the wastewater plant the next month where he was, and no work was done. So I'd have to finish all those work orders. And I'm back and forth and back and forth and back. And it was just frustrating and eating at me, just, tearing at my soul. Like, what am I doing? But I still wasn't responsible enough as an adult to realize where I should be. I didn't make an adult decision I didn't make an adult decision that would affect me probably until I was 40-something.
Wow.
I'm serious. Like, I would just go with the breeze, Mm-hmm. So when I left the city and I quit there because I told him, I'm like either you're gonna make me this guy's boss and give me a huge raise and I'll make sure everything gets done, or I'll terminate him, or I'm leaving. Yeah. And they were like, well, we can't do that. He's been at the plant for 8 years or 7 years, and he's a member of the union, and if we terminated him, he'd just sue us and get his job back. And I love unions. Unions are great. Union trade schools are great. But they do defend the weak, the poor, not poor money, but poor motivated.
Yeah.
Poorly motivated. And he was protected because of that. So I left. I'm like, I'm done. And of course, after I left, then they hired someone and paid him the big money.
Yeah.
And anyway,
it really is odd because I've noticed that union in some cases means excellence.
Yeah.
And then in these weird moments, they defend the hardcore opposite.
Yeah.
And it's weird because I think we've always needed the spirit of a union mm-hmm. to protect the group of workers who can't group negotiate without a structure.
Listen, unions struggle with the same thing that non-union do, and the union itself that represents that group of people, it's just individuals, and individuals have different values, and they know, trust me, these union leaders, business managers, every one of them, they know that there's a certain group that they're just slugs, and they're the ones that they're just going to put out doing the powerhouse shuffle, and they're not going to make somebody $1 million because they're not that guy. They're just a warm body. And they're the type of guys that get let go first, mm-hmm. and they don't get the call because they get refused. It's a real problem. It doesn't mean that the unions are bad.
Right.
It just means that people are people, and they have to represent everybody equally.
Right, and then therein lies kind of the unfortunate trap of the situation that there's a couple of the turds who get undue protection.
Yeah.
But I would rather have it than not, Yeah. But anyhow, so you're realizing it's time to go.
Yeah.
They're telling you basically it's time to go.
I was doing side jobs out the wazoo at that time.
Okay.
So side jobs meaning I'm working for the city, but but I'm working as an illegal contractor, unlicensed, doing remodels and putting in can lights and whatever I could. And I developed enough of a customer base. I said, I'm going to start my own business. So I left out of there and started my own business, and I failed.
What do you mean by that?
Didn't make enough money.
Okay.
And failed.
Yeah.
Even in my business today, I find myself being too much of a nice guy. And if somebody calls me with a sob story, I want to give them a break. And then I look at the books and I'm like, I can't afford to be given these breaks. Like, everybody needs to pay. Like, there's a price for our services.
Yeah.
So back in the day, I was doing everything for the bare minimum. I wanted to be everybody's friend, and I didn't make it. So that was my first experience as a business owner. And I bounced around a couple of places as project manager and estimator. And that's the one time when I talk about Ben not wanting to be in the office, I remember interviewing for a job as an estimator. And the guy says, so this is what your job's going to look like. Here's your office. This is what and I'm like, I'm not going to be in the field at all? He's like, no, you're an estimator. I don't think I can take this job. I didn't want it. I didn't want to be stuck to a chair and get fat like I am from sitting behind a desk. I used to be skinny working in the field and, climbing stairs and ladders and walking the whole job all the time. It was easy to stay fit. And I was like, this is great. But, so then after that, I bounced around and running work for other companies and thinking, man, I'm really not getting the money that I think I'm due.
Yeah.
And
How old are you right now?
This is 96 probably. Yeah, 96. So at that point I was 26 years old.
Okay.
In 1996, my company was incorporated, but it wasn't my company yet. It was my friend Glenn Jordan that I went to trade school with. And he and I met in 1988 in trade school together, and we were buddies the whole way through. And a funny story there, but we were buddies the whole way through. And in 96, he and I started talking one day, and he was running a small business, and he started out with just him, one truck, and a stack full of flyers. He made some friends in real estate, and he would drop flyers, mailers in the mailbox to everybody that bought a home in South Florida. He would advertise everything from wired surround sound to can lights to whatever. He was doing all little stuff, and it was just him. And in 96, he and I started talking about working together. I can't remember exactly when it was that we first started working together. I think it was probably 2000, but might have been 99. I think it was. It's been a long time. But I went to work for Glenn, and immediately we started popping off. He had developed part of his business doing swimming pool electric.
Oh.
And that's a niche that not a lot of electricians do. Not a lot of electricians understand Article 680 in the code. They don't know the difference between bonding and grounding. And these things are frequently jobs that people will turn away. I'll give you an example. We did the swimming pool on the 3rd floor of the new Swan Tower in Disney. Big commercial pool.
Yeah.
On a hotel. And the guy doing the $10 million hotel wiring, he says, I don't want the pool. $60,000, $70,000 worth of work. We're going to take it.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, so we jump over there, wire the pool. Got some great pictures. It's on the website, centralfloridaelectrician.com.
There you go. And I picture you in a scuba suit with wires, which I know is not how it goes. It can't be.
Not at all. This is all about the bonding of a shell, and this was a Murtha style pool where it's a stainless steel tub that they drop into the concrete and then put a liner in. But everything has to be bonded. You've got lights with 12-volt transformers and all this. Anyway, we developed that part of the business in Fort Lauderdale. He had already developed it. But when I came on, our goal was to grow that. And within 12 months, we were working for every pool builder in South Florida that we wanted to work for. There were some of them out there that we knew they were doing shady stuff, or they didn't pay as much as the other one, or they had somebody in-house that was doing something kind of sidebar. We wouldn't work for them. But the dozen builders that we were working for was every big name builder that you could think of down there. And we had trucks. We just started buying more and more trucks. We had guys rolling out every day wiring swimming pools. And those swimming pools led to service changes, led to panel upgrades. It was just cash, and we blew the business up. Our service department went up 500%.
Wow.
It was amazing. So that's when we first got the taste of it. So I worked for Glenn as an employee for quite a long time. And then there came a point where I went to him and I said, hey, I need to go back out and do my own thing, because I see all the money coming in and I'm getting my salary and I got benefits, but I need to get me paid for.
Yeah.
And he decided at that point, we negotiated some sweat equity deal to where I became a partner with an option to buy him out over time. Initially, it was going to be over a 10-year period was the goal. He figured he would retire or go on and do real estate investing or other avenues that he wanted to explore after 10 years. Well, I'm fast forwarding way far ahead. When the PPP loans started coming out during COVID, I was exposed to the Small Business Administration and how those loans work and the approval process, and I just started feeding on this information on how this works and how do I get an SBA loan. And I learned from One Florida Bank, which is a great community bank and has been a super partner for Central Florida Electrician. They showed me how I could get an SBA 7A loan and buy them out overnight. And I did.
Awesome. And he was happy with that.
It was a 3-month process, and I called him up one day, and this is the point where I'm only in Central Florida. We're not doing work in South Florida anymore. And we'd already closed the office there. We're only working here. And I'm like, Glenn, it's time. I'm gonna pay you today or within 3 months. And that's it. So I bought
Out of
him
curiosity, I mean, that's fascinating. He knew it was coming.
Yep.
You had a way of accelerating that. Mm-hmm. How was that conversation? Was he ready for that change?
He wasn't ready, but we're close enough friends to where he recognized that it was time before I recognized it was time.
Okay.
And while he wasn't ready, he was okay with it.
Okay.
He was that far disconnected from the business where he wasn't involved in the daily transactions. He didn't look at the bank account every day. He didn't have to worry about paying the bills every week like we did when we first started. But he was ready to go do the next step. I mean,
what did he move on to?
Oh, man, he was doing day trading for a while and buying and selling real estate. And the last trip I heard him saying he was going to was Thailand, and I think he went there for like a month.
Oh, that's cool.
You went to a month in Thailand? He's like, yeah, it's so cheap over here.
I was going to say, I hear it's very, very affordable.
And he sent me pictures of this condo. He's like, man, I can get this. It was like a 4-bedroom on the 19th floor. It was beautiful, fully furnished. He's like, I can buy it for $130,000.
Come on.
So I don't know. I haven't talked to him in a few months. He's always on the go. Probably move there. I don't know. He's talking about going to South America, and he's just seeing the world. So good for him. I mean, because he's only 2 years older than me.
Okay.
I mean, God bless him. When I grow up, that's what I want to be, is be able to travel the world.
I think a difference between the business that he started and the business you're running now is that it doesn't sound like his family was involved the way your family has become involved.
Yeah. He was always on an island.
Yeah.
I mean, his mom worked for us for a long while, but he was always on his own. He made his own decisions. He was much smarter than I was as a young man. He knew where he wanted to be, and he was far more motivated than I was. But in the end, I learned from experiences with him and found my own motivations.
I'm glad you got there. So it's interesting to me. So you relocated to Central Florida, mm-hmm. and the idea of closing a business in South Florida, opening a business in Central Florida, where I'm guessing you had to establish connections kind of for a first time up here.
It was so difficult.
Why did you make that move, and how the fuck did you pull that off?
It's a way too long of a story, but the gist of it is I had moved to St. Augustine.
Great place. I love that place.
With my sons and their mom for a few years, and I had left working for Glenn to go up there and try some other things. Part of that whole process of, hey, I need to get mine. And that was 2008, 2009, when the bottom dropped out of everything. And it was ugly. Like, I was bouncing around from job to job, questioning whether or not I had what it took to do what I'm doing. Like, I've questioned myself. I've sat home thinking, man, maybe I need to do something else. And in the end, I landed in Lake Mary. That's where I live now, and I met my now wife there. She was managing the apartment complex at the time, and that's when I started working back for Glenn again, and we discussed trying to grow the business in Central Florida, but it was extremely difficult. One example of that is trying to buy. We do a lot of restaurant retail, so when you buy light fixtures for those projects, you have to buy them based on these regional parameters that the distributors set up, or manufacturers. All these vendors, they're allocated to certain areas. So while I used to buy from one down in Pompano Beach, I had to buy from a different one in Orlando. And when I call them up, they're like, yeah, but your office is down south. You can't buy from us. And I'm like, but the job's here. And like, I physically had an office in Sanford when we first started. I'm like, I have a brick and mortar. They're like, yeah, but your license and everything shows Fort Lauderdale.
Come on.
It wouldn't sell me. So what they would do is they'd quote it from the place down south to the place up in Orlando to my vendor. And every time I'm quoting a job, I'm 15, 20% higher than everybody else because I got to pay all these middlemen because of regional crap. Well, that motivated us quickly to establish an office here and close the office there.
Yeah.
And once we did that, then I was able to establish my relationships here. But in the meantime, we still did work. There were contractors, national contractors, some that are from South Florida that did work up here that we were able to pick up work with. And luckily on those jobs, the light fixtures were national account items where I didn't have to worry about those extra charges. But Earl's Kitchen and Bar at the mall at Millennia was one of the big projects we did. It used to be a Blue Martini on the second level at the mall. And the contractor down south said, "Oh, you're up there now. We'd love for you to do this job." And we took the job. It was one of our staple jobs in cementing ourselves here in Central Florida. Since then, we've done many restaurants. We did the exterior escalator at that same mall. We just finished a Zimmerman store, which is some kind of high-end clothing. We always seem to end up with these high-end clothing stores.
Well, they see the top hat and they're like, obviously this guy is our guy.
But I'm looking at the clothes on the rack and it's dresses for women, and I'm like, every one of them is $10,000 and they've only got 200 pieces in here. Like, who's shopping here? I don't know. I've never heard of Zimmerman before, but it's a beautiful joint.
But you made sure they have the lights on.
That's it. I put it in, made them happy, and get in, get out, get paid.
Fascinating. So how are you picking, this is interesting to me. So I relocated C47 Films from New York to Florida a decade ago. In the process, I had work up in New York and a lot of, I had a full team up there. And when you're in film, you do national work where you fly here, fly there, do stuff. So you're used to picking up talent and on location where you'll find the local guys in the local city. And it sounds like maybe the electricians union allows to facilitate that a little bit for your world. But then I come down here and I realize, oh, this is going to be different because nobody knows me down here.
Yeah.
I'm the fish out of water. And there's a lot of people who move here, so I couldn't be the only one, but there's a lot of people who are established here.
Let me tell you about difficulties with that.
Yeah.
So our company was originally founded as Electric Company of South Florida. Now, that seemed like a good idea when Glenn started the company.
In South Florida.
In South Florida. But this was back when 411 was around, and people called 411 when they moved from New York to Florida and said, I need to turn my power on. Who is the electric company in South Florida? Who did they get? My office. Every single day for years they would call the office trying to get their power turned on. We'd tell them, no, you have to call FP&L, Florida Power and Light. But they would think we were the utility company. Well, that, as we moved to Central Florida, hurt us even more because everybody looked at my name and saw of South Florida. And people that aren't in South Florida constantly attribute everything with South Florida with shady Miami business practices. Like when
Well, obviously that's real.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there was a building, the Miami building department down there, there were employees that got busted selling roofing licenses for $10,000. And they busted them, and then they red tagged every roof that those contractors did, and they sent those guys to prison that sold them the licenses. So it's definitely real. So when I tell you that people looked at our company and said, can't hire you, you're a Miami contractor. Man, I was motivated to change. So we filed the new business name, Central Florida Electrician. And that establishes us with who we are and where we are.
Yeah.
So we're electricians, and we're in Central Florida.
I like on-the-nose names.
Yeah.
That's why I chose Bootstrapped Unicorns for this podcast.
Yeah, it's absolutely a good idea.
So you solved that problem. Did that end up causing a problem with the 411 thing where somebody thinks you're going to turn on their electric? But here in Central Florida?
For years, we would still get the calls because we kept the 954 number for many years because it was established.
Yeah.
It took a long transition process to get the 407 number, and I felt it was more important than my business partner at the time did. I felt like a 407 number would establish us more, and we just kept with the 954. But if you call my cell's a 904 number, which is even more confusing.
That's Jacksonville, isn't it?
It is. But when I lived in St. Augustine, that was about the time in 2008, 2009 when portability became a big thing, and your phone number was used at Winn-Dixie and Publix and CVS, and anywhere you go on a website and you got a 2-tier activation and you need that cell phone number. Well, I didn't want to change that number because it's everywhere.
Well, and then also all of the people you know have that.
Yeah.
I mean, I still have my 585 from Rochester, New York.
Right.
I have had this same number since, it's got to be, I think I got it in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
I've got almost 20 years with the same number. Yep. I'm going to die an old man with that number still because that's how friends, contacts, I'm in their phone books, their digital phone books.
Yeah, and most people aren't bothered by it because once the phone number's on their phone, they're not dialing it anymore. It's not like back when I was a kid when you had to remember those numbers.
I think we've graduated in society. I think now you look at it and go, I wonder what their story is.
Yeah.
Where, why is it a 954? Why is it a 904? Why is it a 212? Actually, at this point, if I get a 212, I am confident that it's not anybody important in Manhattan.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely a waste of my time.
The 904 numbers are all the same for me.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yep.
Most of my 585s are now at this point, too, because I'm still registered in a way in some system somewhere where I get all of the political calls. I'm like, no, I'm not voting in Western New York. Sorry.
Yeah. I helped my grandfather out one time. He wanted to buy something. It wasn't even buy it. They were going to give it to him, something he saw on TV. And I put all my information in with the phone number, and I still get these calls every week, sometimes every day, with something about Medicare, Medicaid, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, guys, I'm not that old yet. I mean, I guess I'm getting there, but I'm not that old yet.
No, you have a little time.
Yeah.
So let's get back to this move to Central Florida because I think I watch you now and you're a prolific networker. You're out everywhere. You volunteer in the community. I know you get your personal brand, your name out there, but you're bringing the business name right along with it every time. So I see how you do it now. You're in Lake Mary. You haven't changed the name of the business yet. How are you getting work? What is your method of going from I'm new here and I got nothing to I'm new here and at least I have work?
Yeah, that's a good conversation. It was a long process to get where we are now. We would pay for a service for getting exposed to bids. So there's general contractors out there. That was Plan Hub was the service we were using, and there's general contractors that put their jobs on this platform for bidding. We call that bidding the street. So that's a lot of work. That's me countless hours doing a takeoff on a set of plans, putting it in our estimating software, coming up with a number, whittling it down as tight as we can, trying to make 2% and send it to every GC on the list. So there's 20 GCs trying to build a Dunkin' Donuts. We were chasing every single one. And when we finally changed the name, we got a little bit more recognition. Sometimes it didn't matter because they were national contractors and they didn't care. They just figured we were in Miami doing work in Orlando. But it was still a pitfall overall.
Yeah.
But chasing those on the street jobs, it was very difficult. Maybe our percentage of win was less than 5%.
Ouch.
So I'm spending time getting bids from every vendor and chasing every job on the street. Fast forward to where we are now, and we've established ourselves with contractors both nationally and locally, where they call us up and they're like, hey, we want to work with you. Just got a call this week from a guy. He says, I'm in, what was it? I think it was New York. He says, but I got your name from this other GC, so-and-so, Mike. And Mike says, if you're going to do a Macy's remodel, you need to call Doug over at Central Florida Electrician. He goes, he's the guy. He's done Gander Mountains. He's done this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. You know, Winn-Dixie's, he's very familiar with your retail space. If you're going to remodel it, he's going to be the one that's going to get it done for you on time. He's going to answer the phone when you call him. And if there's a problem on the job, he's personally going to be there to make sure it happens, or his sons will. So, okay, so he calls us up. We sent him over a price of $203,000 for this job. And it was a fair price. We're bidding, you know, fair market value. We're not out of the realm of most other contractors, but we're not always lowest. But I think
that's okay though.
Yeah, I like to think we're better than most. Well, the guy calls me up and he says, "Well, you're $15,000 high." I'm like, okay. I don't normally have that problem with contractors that know me, and I didn't say this to him, but I'm thinking to myself, if you knew me, you wouldn't tell me this. You'd just be like, "Hey, can you give me a few bucks back or something?"
Yeah.
But he didn't do that. He just said, "Hey, you're 15,000 high." I'm like, "Okay, thanks for your time," and I hung up. The next day, Mike calls me. Mike's like, "Hey, can you give him $5,000 out of that 15?" He says, "This job already, they want us to change this, this, and this, and this, and that's a big change order that's coming. I'm sure you'll be able to recoup it." And I said, "Yeah, for $5,000, I'll do that, especially if I'm going to be working with Mike, because somehow Mike gets tied in with this job and he's he's in it." And sure enough, the guy calls back. I'd like to award it to you for $10,000 more than my competition, because he knows that I'm not going to be the problem. I'm going to be the solution. And having a good partner like that you can rely on for these GCs, especially when they're out of state, is paramount. We finished a Hibbett store in Kissimmee last month, and the GC's out of Minnesota or something. And he's like, "Doug, if we have more work in Orlando, I'd call you every day. Is there any way you could send Nick? Nick's been with us for 20 years. He's like, if you could send Nick to these other jobs for me across the country, I'll pay for it." I'm like, "Dude, I can't afford to lose him." But they're just so happy that we were very hands-on.
Is that the give a shit factor?
Oh, Nick's got give a shit coming out of his pockets. Yeah, that's why he's been with us for 20 years. You know,
that's awesome.
You know, there's lots of guys in our company that treat it like that. And if we do the job right, meet their schedules, and then handle the change orders properly, they're going to hire us again. And one of the things I pride myself on with these general contractors is, say, for instance, they've missed something on the plan. And that's a change order to me, but the GC is eating it. And I know that my partner, this GC, has to eat that money. I'm going to give it to him for cost. I mean, I'm going to put my overhead in there, but I'm going to do it for cost.
Right.
And he knows that. But if the project manager or the owner's rep comes in and says, "I know you just put these $20,000 light fixtures up and it took you 4 days, and I'd like to shift them all 4 feet over." That's an owner-derived change order.
Yeah.
We're both going to make money on that.
Yes,
So
as you should.
I think that's the fair way to be. You know, we're all here to make money. And my biggest thing is these contractors, I brag about this, and it's a bit of an exaggeration, but I have fired contractors over the last 2 years that don't pay me on time. When they call me and ask me to do more work, I'm like, "No, I can't afford to work for you.
Yeah.
I've been giving you a 0-interest loan for the last 10 years that I've known you, and I don't want to work for you." But if I find a general contractor that pays every 30 days and respects the relationship that I'm going to give them by not overcharging them on a change order that they have to eat, and letting us both eat when it's an owner-derived, that's a match made in heaven.
All right. Well, I know one around the corner, and we're going to go have barbecue with them.
Good.
And so you're going to get your next great GC. They're local, but they do regional and out of state.
Okay.
And some of their stuff is pretty sexy. It's
Cool.
like cool big names and things.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll talk about that off camera. But hold me to it. You got to remind me. You know, sometimes the creative side of me just. So the other day you told me a story, and this is in line with the concept of, you know, bidding and takeoffs and things. You know, you were, and for those of you who don't know, takeoffs is like a shorthand slang for looking at a plan and, you know, taking all of that data and getting, you know, financial numbers so you know how to set up a bid. But the Doug Jr. was working on something, sent it out to the people who could say yay or nay, we want to hire you, and, you know, or not. and suddenly there was a whole bunch of other quotes that showed up that now you're in a hotly contested competition. And there was a TMI factor that I'd love for you to tell me about, because I think is really instructive for small businesses.
Yeah.
That sometimes you can tip your hand to a point where you actually damage yourself.
Absolutely.
And this story hit home because I've done it. So, and I don't remember all the details, so I need your help here. What happened and how did you fix it?
You were asking before about an example of something bad that happened in the business, and we had to have like a come to Jesus meeting or whatever.
Yeah.
This might have been that way for other people, but for Doug Jr. and myself, it was just a learning curve. Like, he went to the customer, gave him a price. They said it's too much. He went in, walked the job with them, and said, well, we can eliminate this, eliminate that, change this, change that, go with this, it'll save some money. Brought the price down even more, and they're like, all right, we still want to send it out to quote. So they sent it out and asked 2 other contractors to come over and quote it. One of them came in way over where we were, so we looked like heroes. And then the next one came in under our quote. Well, DJ came into the office, Doug Jr., and he says to their office and said, well, let's take a look. Let's make sure it's apples for apples.
Yeah.
And when he showed them their proposal, when the guy showed Doug Jr. their proposal, it was our proposal, word for word. And what they did was they took our proposal, wiped out the number, and handed it to him and said, here, quote this. And Doug Jr., in an effort to be transparent and demonstrate a full body of work and say, this is what's included,
Sure.
gave them footages, wire size, this, that. He was completely descriptive, and what he did was he gave them an instruction manual on how to do the job. So they took that, gave it to somebody in the office of one of our larger competitors, which I expected him to be way higher, but they gave it to a clerical person in the estimating department, service department, and they just said, okay, 100 feet of this, 200 feet of that, blah, 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 and spit it out. And Doug Jr. is smart enough. He picked it apart, and he told the customer, he says, look, they didn't include this because I didn't write it. They didn't include this, this, and this because I didn't write it. These things were there for you to understand the scope, but not a complete instruction manual. So they need to include this, 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 and this, and this, and this, and then it will be apples for apples. And at that point, they looked at Doug Jr. He's developed this relationship with them over the years. They've hired us for many service projects, but they finally looked at him and said, okay, we're just going to hire you. We don't have to go back to them because we don't want to tell them how to do it.
Right.
You know, we just wanted comp numbers. And I felt a little bit like they were just trying to beat us up. They wanted a number check from someone else.
And that happens, and I respect it, especially I've had this happen with some nonprofits, which it kind of irks me a little bit that a nonprofit, like, I'd like them to, I hope people would see our business and go, they're honest, they're not going to take advantage of us. Yet sometimes it happens, and this literally happened about 9 months ago. I went through 4 meetings with a client, coaching them into how to be prepared to do a video project.
Yeah.
Finally, it's bid time. I did exactly what Doug Jr. did. I sent them every single line item, every employee that was going to be on the job, every piece of equipment that was going to be on the job, because they seemed so nervous that I was trying to wow them with detail, and that I wanted the meeting to walk them through.
Yeah.
I didn't get the meeting. I got a notice that we didn't get the work. And then I did get a follow-up conversation with somebody that showed me the winning bid. That was my bid.
Yeah.
And what they did was almost word for word. There was some very, very minor changes, but they took off like 15 or 20%, like straight across. Like there was it was not hidden. It was just basically multiply by 0.8.
Yeah.
And so that's a dangerous thing when you're bidding something, to be so transparent that you're teaching your client and competition how to beat you.
Well, it's a delicate balance. Like we look at service estimates. Service meaning you call me for a panel change in your home, or you're adding a hot tub in your home, so that we consider that service work. We're going to provide a service in your house or your business, but not a commercial project, you know, as opposed to that. So when we look at those proposals, we might quote $1,900 for an inside panel change, and that's just a rough number. There's a lot of attributing factors that determine what that cost is. But let's say $1,900. We can send a proposal that's maybe 3 sentences. You know, we're going to change your panel. We're going to label it. We're going to terminate the wires back on the appropriate size breaker, and we're going to permit it and stand the inspection. Done.
Yeah.
That's your proposal. Now, our competition in the area, there's a couple of big name contractors that do a lot of advertising. And when they send their proposal, the font size is 1.5 to 2 times what ours is. The spacing's more, and that proposal is going to be 2.5 pages. And they're going to say things in there that really embellish what it is. And they're going to say, I forget the terminology they use, but they'll have like a basic panel change and an extra panel change and a super whammadine panel change, and I'm not remembering the words, but
sure.
They really expand on it.
They're probably describing the powder coating on the door.
Yeah, and they'll say THSN wire and blah, blah, blah. And all of these things are meant to make a typical residential customer feel like they're getting a lot.
Yeah.
Well, we've had customers call us and be like, you're at $1,900. This other guy's at $7,800. And we're like, well, what is he including? And they're like, well, it's a lot of words, but it looks like just a panel change.
Yeah.
So then we go through it with them, and it sure is. They just made it that much longer. Yep. And, you know, the average cost is $1,900, but that company can get it. And they've got, if you look at these big companies, they'll have 500 reviews, and everybody's happy. So there's a market for them.
There is. It's there. I'm out of that market because
right.
I know too much about general contracting basics to be happy with that.
Yeah.
We had one of those guys, Mr. the guy. I won't use the full name. Mm-hmm. They wanted $10,000 for a 150 amp panel change.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean,
they get it sometimes.
That's outstanding that they do. Yeah. You know, I like free market commerce, but at the same time, yeesh.
But my point with that was they're taking advantage of the customer. And then what we took from that exchange through the years was, if we're writing a really important estimate, we need to expand on the description. DJ took it, expanded, and then they handed it to our competition.
Yeah.
So
there's like a middle ground that you have to do, where show you're competent without teaching the whole thing.
Yeah, and there'll be times where we'll have to do an expanded proposal to create a narrative, paint a word picture, if you will. But we've learned, don't give them an instruction manual.
So that's the lesson in this. Don't give them an instruction manual, but you got to show that you're smart enough to do the work that you claim you can do. Yep. I love it.
And the next thing is for your there's 3 different types of electrical contractors, if you will. There's going to be the big name that does all the advertising, and they're going to get the most for the same work that I do. There's guys like me that sit in the middle of the road, and there's hundreds of us in Central Florida doing the same thing for about the same price, paying the same labor and the same materials. And then there's the handyman, and he's the unlicensed guy that, I'll give you for instance, we do a lot of electric vehicle hookups. The average cost is around $650 for a basic 60 amp Tesla charger, or a Ford charger, or a Mercedes charger. It's a hardwired charger within, say, 10 feet of the panel, and $650 is about the average cost. If you get up to the 100 amp chargers, like for my Ford Lightning, it could be $1,500. If you're running it down the side of the house out to the front of the garage, it could be thousands. It could be $2-3 grand. But you look at the handyman, and the handyman says, "Oh, I'll wire it next to your panel for $300."
Ooh.
Well, the materials are $250, you know, and he's going to do it for $50. I don't know if he's stealing material from his boss or if he's just happy working for $50. I'm not sure.
You know, I do think a lot of those handymen don't understand pricing. Yeah. They go out of business a lot. In fact, actually, so we're both in B&I, and so I've seen in my B&I experience over the last 6 years now that I've been in B&I in Central Florida, I've been in a group with handymen, 6-7 different handymen. Mm-hmm. All of them have dropped out of B&I from having too much work. Mm. Then, because their pricing and the fact that they're not getting more workflow because they have dropped out, they're closed.
Yeah, it's tough. I hope one day to retire and be a code enforcement officer that writes up every unlicensed contractor in Central Florida, because it's rampant. There are people that come out there and represent themselves as a contractor.
Yeah.
And in Florida, you can't contract work as an electrician unless you have an electrical license. Same thing with plumbing, HVAC. Now, they can lay carpet, they can paint,
sure,
they can do tile work.
Things that don't generally kill people.
But they can't build a wall, they can't build a structure, they can't wire anything, they can't plumb anything. So all this, they need to stay in their lane.
Yeah.
And the problem that I'm having in this industry is people will call me and say, well, my buddy Joe says he'll do it for this. And I'm like, well, then do it, but make sure he pulls a permit. Oh, he can't pull a permit. Or then...
Good luck selling the house.
Yeah, or, well, maybe that doesn't come back on you, but I hope it doesn't burn down. I mean, there's a lot of money that goes into me sending a guy in a truck out to your home to wire that charger for $650.
Do you carry insurance? I bet you carry insurance. Yeah.
I got the $1 million, $2 million on liability. I got workers' comp. We're sending a vehicle out there with an insurance policy on the vehicle to park in your front yard for $1 million on the vehicle. Like, God help us, man. That's a lot of money we spend just to send them out there. I'm sending a guy out in a lettered van with a company shirt with letters on his shirt so that people know that they work for me and I'm not just letting some rando come in their house. But the overhead, the cost associated with sending one person to your home, I don't know how I do know how these people get away with these $49 ads. They'll say, oh, we'll come to your house for $49 and fix this or this. Well, that's a gimmick.
It is always a gimmick.
They get in your door and then you're going to spend thousands.
That's right.
Because they'll offer you financing. And they'll tell you it's going to burn down or what. They use a lot of scare tactics. We don't try to do that.
Yeah. No, you don't need to.
Yep.
That's the whole point.
Yep.
Well, Doug, I love these conversations.
Yeah,
I end up learning
we're going too long.
You know what? I don't think we do. Our audience, it's interesting. I'll tell the audience right now. When we get views, and of course I'm not paying for eyeballs. I go for organic views only because I want quality people engaging with us who are really interested. People are watching the whole episodes on YouTube. And when they watch, the views are not just like, 5 minutes and I'm done. They must be at their desk leaving it running or something. So there clearly is value in these conversations. And selfishly, I grow every time I sit with somebody like you and I get to hear these stories. I learn, and it's just worth it. It's just always worth it. So before we wrap this show up, Tony, our in-house producer over here, has an idea that we have left untested until right now. Are you ready to play a game with me?
I'll do it.
It's kind of word association. I'm looking for short answers. I don't really have all the plans. Actually, Tony, you'll have to edit some of this. Can you grab my computer while I do this? My daughter was calling me from school, which she should not be doing.
Is it in your bag?
Yeah, it's in the backpack. Yep. Bella. Thanks. All right. Everything okay, kiddo? Question mark? She'll let me know. All right. I took notes on this morning, and I should have printed them.
Of course not.
Why would I do that? That's too easy.
Let's circle back at the end, too, and just do a quick touch on college student debt as opposed to trade school. Let's just do that one time.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, look at the bottom of these here. All right. Haha. All right, so it's time for unicorn games. I've got my laptop out. This is where I'm just going to ask you a whole bunch of rapid fire questions. I hope we can keep the answers under 60 seconds. So it's all social media gold. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. Business stuff. What's the best business advice you have ever gotten?
The best business advice I've ever gotten. I would have to say the buyout of my partner. The relationship with One Florida Bank, my local community bank here in Central Florida, has been the biggest help to me as a business owner.
Awesome. If your business had a theme song, what is it and why?
Oh boy, a theme song?
Oh yeah.
Man, it'd have to be a song that I would write, and the lyrics would be get in, get out, get paid, because that's our motivation for the year. That's what we've discussed in the offices. This is our theme for 2024. No more waiting for contractors to pay for us. No more long jobs that run on forever and never seem to make any money. We're there to do the job, get finished, and collect money.
Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 horses the size of a duck?
I would fight the one horse-sized duck.
Why?
I could beat a horse-sized duck.
You just know it?
I think so. I've wrangled cows.
Really?
Absolutely.
Why would you wrangle a cow?
My grandfather, he passed away last November, but I'm sorry, a year ago last November. Wow. He had 15 acres up around Gainesville, and he always had cows and chickens and goats. And one year we decided to buy a dairy bull, because a dairy farm doesn't need bulls unless you're from the movie Kingpin. You remember that scene? So we raised a bull from a bottle calf 2 days old, and now he's a full-grown bull. And yeah, we've wrangled bulls and cows for years.
That's cool. All right, do you currently have any animals? I think you do.
When my grandfather passed away, I gave Haywood. Haywood was the bull. I gave him to my cousin Mark. And
so Haywood's in the family.
Oh yeah, Haywood's a breeder. He's broken out several times to breed the neighbors' cows.
How are the neighbors with that?
One of them wasn't very happy. They didn't want to be bred with a Holstein, which, if you don't know cattle, I mean, a Holstein and a Jersey are like dairy cows. And if you want, from reading a menu, like Black Angus is the sought-after beef cow. So he bred a couple of Angus cows, and that's going to be an odd-looking calf. Not terribly odd, but not a money winner for the...
It'll have a great personality.
Yeah, and probably taste delicious.
I'm sure it'll be fine. All right, so are you a dreamer? When you go to bed at night...
I dream every night.
Oh, awesome. That's a good question movies. Then. What is the weirdest business-based dream you've had?
I don't know that I've had a weird business-based dream. I got nothing for you there.
Wow, can I tell you a hallucination I had once? It was fun. So my appendix exploded in 2016.
Oh, man.
I didn't know about it for 4 days. I have a very high pain tolerance. So I walked around. I went to a trampoline park with the kids.
Oh, my God.
Oh, it was a mess. And so it's a Sunday.
Like, people die from that, don't they?
Right. So it's a Sunday, and I'm telling my wife, I said, babe, something's actually really wrong. Take me to the hospital. So now I'm passing out in the car on the way to the hospital. I'm still not feeling the pain. Honestly, it felt like I just really had to go. And so I get there, and they start checking me and whatever CTs or whatever to look inside me. They're like, when did you have your appendix out? And I said, I've never had surgery in my life. And they're like, you have no appendix. Did you know you have no appendix? I'm like, nobody mentioned it.
Right.
And
So they're just thinking you didn't have one.
Right, yeah. And so they were like, we think it burst, sir. And then I start spiking a temperature really bad, like out of nowhere. And she's like, oh, you're going septic right now.
Holy crap.
Right. So they put me under what's supposed to be a 45-minute surgery, ended up being 4.5 hours because they had to clean all of my insides. So now I'm in the hospital for 7 or 8 days. And they have me on, I think it's called Dilaudid and morphine at the same time.
That's the good stuff, huh?
Apparently. Because I am seeing things. And I will never forget this as long as I live. I'm in the hospital bed. My eyes are open, but I'm not seeing the room. I'm seeing the White House. And behind the White House is a 400-foot tall version of Frederick Douglass's head floating up over, and it's not a hot air balloon, but it's acting like it is. And his eyes get really wide open, and in my hallucination, we're locking eyes. And I'm saying out loud, and the nurses actually told me later that I was doing this. I'm like, Frederick, slow down. Frederick, you're going to crash. And so I'm warning him like crazy. And so he has the wise idea to roll his tongue out of his mouth like it's a red carpet and start dragging it on the White House lawn until he comes to a slow stop, and he's just kind of hovering slowly back and forth.
You were tripping balls.
I was tripping balls. And I stared at Frederick. I remember, and I don't know how long it actually took, but I'm pretty sure I spent a couple of hours with silently looking at Frederick as he was looking at me. And we were just one. We were tight. We were friends. I cared so much about him. He was a little concerned for himself. He was a little concerned for me. Like there was a connection happening there.
Yeah.
And I literally, when I tell this story, I can still feel it. It was so real. So that's my hallucination dream that has nothing to do with business, but it was a thing. Yeah, you're welcome.
If I dream about business, it's typically something risky, like being up in a giant snorkel lift, changing a light bulb way too high, and the scariness part of that, or something like that. But most times I dream about not work.
I get it. So do you have a spirit animal, and how does that animal contribute to your entrepreneurial journey?
I don't think I do. I don't think I've ever considered what is my spirit animal.
I feel like Mullet Mike is your spirit animal.
You know what? That dude's got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we're not only going to have him come on the show, but he actually wants to have a show.
Yeah.
You're going to have to be a guest on that when that
For sure.
happens. For sure. All right, so that's just a couple of my questions. Tony, how are we doing? Do these have any fun social media value?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, definitely.
Winning. Favorite sports team and why?
Miami Dolphins, because I grew up in South Florida.
Yeah, all right. And how you feeling this year? I'm sorry.
You know, it was improvement, exponential improvement from the year before. And Tua stayed healthy. He didn't get killed. So that was good. I don't know that he's the guy, but I'm confident in Coach McDaniels that we're moving in the right direction.
Does McDaniels have some Shula in him?
I wouldn't ever want to put that on somebody. You know what I mean? Like Shula, man, I grew up watching Shula and Marino, and I was born in 70. So I remember the 85 year, and it was phenomenal. But I don't know that he's got some Shula in him, but he's definitely very good at what he does, and the players like him. And I'm big on being a player's coach, you know. And he gets their attention. He seems to be very creative.
All right, I got one more business question, and then we got to get on to the trades question that you wanted to talk about. Do you ever get in a funk as a business owner?
All the time.
How do you deal with
cycle.
that? So tell me about it.
I think every small business owner has that cycle of, you know, one day you're feeling like, oh man, the cash flow is really good this week, and you still trip up and you're like, oh man, I got to worry about where's the next job going to start. And then the next day it's all of a sudden it's down here, you paid all your bills. Oh man, the money's all gone. Where's the next money going to come from? And then I got to get a job start. Do I have enough guys? And then, I got awarded a job, and do I have enough guys? And when can I get my first draw? It's a constant cycle of up and down. And I tell my sons all the time when work slows down, and it does typically, not this year, but typically January is a slow part of the year. We hit a couple of weeks where we had finished up our commercial projects and we were only doing service, so that was nice. But I'm like, guys, take advantage of the downtime. When you're down, and I know you're worried about where's the next job, but when things are slow, that's the time. Take half a day off and go fishing, or take a whole day off and go take your kids to the theme parks or something. You know, it's the perfect time to do it, because when the crap's hitting the fan and everybody's balls to the wall, you're too busy to do it, and you can't see your way out of it. So
you're taking that as a gift.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to. I mean, I have to force myself to try and find the positives even when things are looking bad.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you spent all your money and you're at the bottom and you're like, well, I know there's money coming in at the end of the week or the beginning of next week, and it'll be fine. But at that one particular point, you're looking at the bank account and you're like, oh my God, where did that? I just collected $200,000. Where did it go? And it's like, oh yeah, we had to pay all that. Well, it's a constant struggle.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
I get it. So the trades.
Yeah. It's important for young people in particular, but there is no age limitation anymore. You can't discriminate against someone that wants to be a first-year apprentice in any trade in America now because of the age discrimination laws. But specifically for high school kids, when I grew up, graduated high school in 1988, and the process was tell everybody, got to go to college, got to get a degree.
Yep.
And then, like, a degree in what? Like, I got a buddy, he owns a pool contracting company, and he's got a degree in sociology or something. Like, he's going to see this and be like, you know what it is, dummy? But he's got a degree that he's never used.
Yeah.
And he's a contractor now.
It's a very expensive 4 years
Right?
that didn't pay off.
And he's a very smart guy.
I'm sure he is.
But he found his money in pools.
Yeah.
And when I look at other people, I just interviewed a kid for a job the other day. He's a first-year apprentice. And he's like, oh, I'm going to Southern Technical, whatever. And it cost me $17,000 for an 18-month course to learn to be an electrician. I'm like, well, I don't want to tell him, but 18 months isn't enough to learn.
Right.
$17,000 is way too much to pay. When there's opportunities at your local unions to go to a trade school For instance, in Orlando, you can go to Local 606 and start making $15 an hour as a first-year apprentice on day one. Your cost for school is zero. You have to pay for your books every year, and from what I understand, I think it's around $500 a year. But $500 a year for 5 years is all you're paying. You're going to go to school while you're going to work, making a wage, learning a trade with on-the-job skills. You're getting the book knowledge. You're getting code books every year. It's the way to go for people that aren't suited for those college programs. You look at people like Elon Musk, and he said something one time in an interview about how, getting a degree right now is not as important as it used to be, when people can learn so much on a YouTube channel or something.
Yeah, he's so right.
I get it, but there's still jobs out there that require a bachelor's degree, and they're only paying $12,000 a year or something silly.
There's a mismatch, miserable mismatch.
It is, but that's a pitfall. You know what I mean? Like a young kid, 18 years old, finishing up high school, is going to fall off the edge of that pitfall and get strapped with all that student debt, and then realize after he's done that maybe he should have just been a tile contractor or something, work with his hands. And fortunately enough for me, with the dumb luck, my dad pushed me in the right direction. He's like, look, if you're going to be a dummy and you just think that you and your mullet and your Camaro are going to date girls for the rest of your life and live in my house, you're going to need a job, and you need a skilled trade. Thank God for him, because the skilled trade has fed me, it's fed my family. My boys now have families. They both own homes, and we're doing decent. We're making a living.
That's awesome. Can I please make a request that we need a photograph of you with a mullet?
Yeah, I can provide you several. My brother just sent me an old home video.
No kidding.
Man, it was so bad.
Yeah.
So much hair.
Nice. Well, that'll be the cover art for this episode. And hey,
but wait. I do still have hair though.
No, you do. So, it's just not mulleted.
I point that out for if my brother decides to see the video. I want to point out because my brother's bald. Love you, Dave.
Hi, Dave. Nice to meet you. We both have hair. You don't. Yeah. I enjoy my time with you. We're going to have you come back on, and I think we're going to do an episode of stories in the trenches, because you've told me some stories and they're good. Yeah. But this episode will run infinitely long if we go there today. So yes, I'm teasing for the next time Doug's on the show. And yes, you should come back to Bootstrapped Unicorns, because we have conversations like this. Yeah, sure, we ran a little long. You learned a ton in the process, and I bet you had some fun and some laughs along the way. That's what Bootstrapped Unicorns is. We are entrepreneurs here for our friends who are entrepreneurs. Are you a friend? Yes, you are, because you're here with us watching right now. Join, subscribe, follow us, whatever it takes to be in our world. And yes, on Facebook, we have a private group, Bootstrapped Unicorns Marketing and Entrepreneurship Group. This is for people like you, people like us, we're both in the group, to be in there, and iron sharpens iron. You can ask questions and interact as a fellow entrepreneur. Do I charge for access? No. Will I charge for access? No. This is just for all of us to get a little bit better today so that we can be even better tomorrow. I expect to see you in that group. If you're not already in, what the heck are you waiting for? I'm Josh Pies. This is Doug Spence. Neither of us have mullets. You're watching Bootstrapped Unicorns.